Hey, White Sox fans, Winston-Salem Dash fans, Super Joe Resis fans, fans of summer weddings, all of you are here gathered to sit in on our second update. I believe it's our second update of the season, checking in on Winston-Salem Dash with our guy focusing on the Dash, of course, focusing on all of the minor leagues for us this year. It's Joe Resis. Thank you for pausing your globe-trotting just a bit to check in for a half hour or so about the Winston-Salem Dash. Joe, everything okay?
Everything is going very well. Happy to be here.
All right. Okay, important editorial note here that I'll add. Joe has been with us at Southside Sox since 2019. Is that correct, Joe?
Yes.
Okay, that sort of tenure gets special consideration. You'll notice that this year Joe has a strong, almost exclusive emphasis on the minor leagues. You'll also notice that since Joe's moved more exclusively over to the minor leagues for us, the minor league system is actually doing pretty well. You know, sorry, AAA, but you're always going to be that way, Charlotte. And again, just looking out, this is like a sort of a mental health check on Joe Resis. It's like, you know, for a year, especially this year, we just got to largely move Joe off of covering the Chicago White Sox. I think it's been to his benefit so far. 2 months in, I feel a little freer, a little lighter, a little less heavy, Joe. Is the experiment working?
It is. And yeah, it's definitely more enjoyable to cover the minor league system right now. And yeah, there are a number of positive storylines to follow, which we have a shortage of those at the major league level. So it's definitely felt better.
Yes. And, the West Coast guy now, but pulled back in the Illinois area for this weekend. You're not feeling a strong pull, to the south side. Got to grab yourself a milkshake. See an ugly loss to the Orioles this weekend. You're going to try to squeeze time in, or are you okay just with the drive-by?
It's funny. I was at the game with the infield fly rule a few nights ago.
Okay.
That was certainly an experience.
All right.
There were a few minutes of happiness in the ninth inning of that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like as long as I'm in town, I feel like almost obligated to
all right.
Game.
Okay. Yeah, you got your fix, and you got it way out of the way, and now you won't feel pulled back. You already saw your loss for the year. You can check that off of your to-do list for 2024. All right, fair enough. System-wise, as alluded, stunningly, I believe this would be for the first time since I've been around doing anything like this, that the system is pretty much strong top to bottom. Again, sorry, Charlotte, we sort of don't count you. You're filled with such a mishmash of players anyhow, and it seems like oftentimes, Brian Ramos, as the most recent example, guys don't even necessarily make a stop at Charlotte sometime on their way to the major league. So we're going to put you to the side, and really the rest of the system is pretty strong. Joe, we're going to talk about the laggards of the system, and that's those lame Winston-Salem Dash. They're hovering like 500. I think they're 21-22. They're 11-8 since we last talked, so it's not like, they responded to the fact that you've served notice on them and you're watching them closely, but they've responded well enough. I mean, a winning record, okay, we'll take it. Only 2 games out of first place. I mean, they are within striking distance of playoffs for sure. Very early to be talking about this. Although, interestingly, the team, they're squeezing wins seemingly out of thin air. They don't have a ton of standout performers, at least who are with the roster at the moment. And the run differential, negative 45, surprising that the team is even close to 500, given that they're getting routed here and there, and the wins they're getting are sort of squeakers. I guess that speaks well to the pitching staff, maybe to the defense, but they're doing a little bit with Mir so far, hovering at 500.
Yes, I will say, they really didn't have much as far as players who are near the top of their prospect rankings with Winston-Salem to begin the year, and now it's even more fair with especially Schultz and Gonzalez earning promotions. So the fact that they're even sniffing the 500 level right at this point is a pleasant surprise. Like you said, they've been routed quite a bit, but I mean, they're still finding ways to, win a lot of close games, and that's, an exciting development. It makes, the team more enjoyable to follow, and still have, I think, some untapped potential in this group.
Yeah. Hey, they just got to keep up with the team behind them and ahead of them. And the good news, I guess, is Birmingham is pretty set. They don't need to keep sucking talent out of high A because, as it is, they sort of got too much. We're going to start first half of this podcast, Joe. We're going to talk a little pitching. I think the guy we really need to focus on, of course, the guy you already alluded to as being really one of the only two marquee players who even started the season with the Dash. Noah Schultz, promoted to Birmingham, going to pitch somehow. I guess they're going 6-man rotation briefly or something. I think undoubtedly Birmingham is close to, if not at the top. Last time I checked, they're maybe like 5th in the minor leagues, just record-wise. I think they haven't lost, so they could only have crept higher, I think. And I think with that, clearly the best starting rotation in the minor leagues. So Noah Schultz is going there, not really having ever in his professional career really had like a start, that was what we would consider a true start. I know we want to protect Noah Schultz, but, he hasn't gone 5 innings as a pro, I don't believe. He's pitched 27 and change with the Dash, 54 career. I mean, this is a guy who's still very young and raw. He's being moved up to Birmingham at a time when there's not an obvious opening. I mean, let's face it, there's not going to be an obvious opening all year. They could promote that rotation to the White Sox, and there might not be an obvious opening. They're so loaded. But step me through maybe the thinking for the White Sox or what your personal thoughts are in moving him now. I mean, clearly he was destined for Birmingham, presumably this year. The idea that it's happening before 2 months of the season are even out of the way when there's not really an obvious opening for him to take over as a main guy seems a little peculiar. What are your thoughts hearing the news and, going forward with him?
Yeah, it is interesting timing. I am surprised it happened this soon. Was it deserved? I think it was. I mean, he has been pretty dominant. His strikeout rate is through the roof, and he's had some bad luck on balls in play that's kind of inflating his ERA a little bit, but even still, he's had an ERA under 4 in this, kind of limited sample size with the Dash. I think it's good to see, a deserving prospect get rewarded. I am, a little bit surprised to see it happen quite this early, but I think he'll do well in Birmingham. My main concern would be that, they're maybe moving a little bit too quickly, but, if they're able to kind of limit his workload, and it seems as though they're very careful about doing that, then I think that's the main thing that's on my mind right now as far as his development, as kind of, a hard throwing, extremely tall pitcher, that's, young, very early in his career. I'm, very, very concerned about, the injury risk that, he has, but they've been very careful, which has been good to see. And I think as long as they're not going to overwork him, he's been pitching largely, once every 6th game with Winston-Salem. And even then it's only been roughly 4 innings at a time. As long as, they're able to kind of keep his workload relatively modest, I think right now that's the best, kind of short-term treatment for him. And I think that's the main thing on the agenda.
Yeah, it's not to say that he's been injury-riddled in the least. I think he did get a slow start to maybe last season because he had maybe a little shoulder, just something that was minor enough for him to be able to pitch. What does it tell you, Joe, that the White Sox seem to be emphasizing challenging Schultz? Because yes, he has over, even if the ERA isn't it's not a Drew Thorpe ERA. He's clearly overwhelming high A batters and probably not necessarily being challenged by them. What does it say that the White Sox are prioritizing challenging Schultz, a young guy? I mean, it's not like the clock is ticking on him. He's 25. We got to rush him to the South Side, over building him up. I mean, this is a guy. Clear. I don't think there's any option. There's no Chris Sale or Garrett Crochet mystery here about will he be as with most guys, if he ends up being a back end, even like a Kopech, it's well, you're gonna have to sort of pitch your way into that. That's not the desired outcome for any of these golden arms. You want them to be your 7-inning, 6-inning starters in the major leagues. Schultz hasn't even had a breakout game that way, and that's in part because the rain is pretty tight on him. I want to say it's like a 60-pitch type of outing rain they have on him this year. What does it say that they're prioritizing challenging him at AA over building him up in any way? You'd think, maybe just a 1-5-inning start would be like, okay, you did the minimum test at high A, let's get you to AA now. I get the idea that you don't want to overload this guy. He's still very young, still probably learning his way around. And at this point at AA, he might not just be able to sneeze and overwhelm batters. He's getting to that point at some time. He's going to hit a wall where these guys can't hit, and they're not going to be so scared, even as he's reaching out there to tickle them under their chins, with his reach. What does it say about that type of priority? Because it's a little interesting to me for a guy who's clearly, there's no question here, like, well, what's his role going to be? Or he's been injury riddled, so let's just try to get 3 innings at a time and make him into a Josh Hader guy. What does it say that they're sort of pushing him to AA without really having proven any of that durability? And do you think is that even an important issue, or is it more important to be challenging him?
I think it shows that they're very, very curious about how he will fare at the higher levels of the minors. We all know like he's not going to get playing time this year in the majors. That's pretty much a guarantee. Regardless of how dominant he was at the beginning of this season, like I don't think it would have made a difference on that front. And even if he was ready, like the benefit of him, making the big jump to the majors, it's not going to help the 2024 White Sox with any sort of a playoff push. I think maybe a little bit too curious, maybe a little bit of impatience of wanting to see like, is this guy the real deal? I think. I feel kind of like I could understand why they're doing this. Although, I personally would have waited a little bit longer. Like there haven't been any, massive like moments where it's like after this performance, we know that he definitely doesn't belong in this level anymore. Like he is better than most pitchers at the high A level, but given his age, which is an important factor in this, I think it's probably maybe shows that a little bit of just extra, extra curiosity as far as like, okay, how is this guy going to do at the next level? Yeah. Which probably is, I feel it seems to me as though they should probably pump the brakes at least a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. To me, it's probably old school thinking of like, geez, the guy hasn't even like qualified for a win in one of his starts, and yet he's already at AA. And maybe AA is the point. I guess traditionally it's a little bit more pitching safe environment at Regions Field, and maybe this is the place where they are going to make sure where he gets 7 innings or whatever. Maybe they're not even envisioning that he pitches in Charlotte unless it's maybe coming back down through. I mean, they whooshed Jonathan Cannon through the system, before being demoted from the South Side. I mean, I think he had like 2 starts maybe at AAA. So Charlotte is looked at as more incidental than a crucial point. And, you wonder with any of these guys in Birmingham, how many of them may just go to Chicago. I mean, I can't imagine they're going to feel that Drew Thorpe has to go to Charlotte at this point with how dominant he's been. So who knows? Maybe this is the spot where they're going to keep him for even like a year and really build him up, and then maybe come out of spring next year or something. Maybe he breaks out. We're just talking wishful, right? We've got these arms, and it's sort of exciting, to talk about that there actually is a list of guys. This is, once again, I think the first time since I've been this close to the Sox now over half a dozen years or so, where you can say, wow, we really have our guys to choose from. Still all sort of lower in the system, if you want to call AA lower. Mm-hmm. But, I'm interested to see how it plays out. And it's just sort of curious. That's why I sort of want to lead off with Schultz, obviously a guy who has now left Winston-Salem. We just talk with a winsome tone of the guys who have left. And of course, we'll lead off with another guy who's left in the second half here. Let's get to a couple other arms, though, Joe. I'm going to skip through in case we don't have time. A couple guys we talked about in Juan Corella, who's continued to pitch really well and seems to be maybe the guy in position maybe to get called up, because apparently everybody's just going to end up in the rotation at Birmingham. So if they need 7 or 8 or 9 starters, maybe Corella's up next. Maybe he's getting the call in a couple of days. And of course, Liberty High School's own Riley Gowns, who continues to actually overwhelm to a degree. If you just look whip-wise, the way Noah Schultz has done. Of course, his ERA is a little chunkier, but the guy, he's a hoss. He actually does pitch deeper in the game. So pretty impressive arm as part of a whatever 5-player deal for Aaron Bummer. But that's my Wildcat bias speaking there. Let's talk about Tyler Schweitzer. He's a guy who we skipped over last time. I'm not sure if he got a slow start to the season or not, but he's had at least one, if not multiple impressive outings. He's a guy who maybe came into the season with a decent amount of hype. Certainly has, I think, a pretty good ceiling in the White Sox eyes. Talk to me a little bit about what Tyler's been doing. And, I guess maybe his bus ticket's waiting for him, too. He might just be the 8th starter in Birmingham. But, what's he got to prove? What's he been doing?
At this rate, he will probably be starter number 8 in Birmingham pretty soon. He did get off to kind of a mediocre start to the season. With all the other players, on the agenda last time when we talked, he kind of, slipped under the radar. But yeah, it's definitely impossible to watch him, slip under the radar again after the solid month of May that he's putting together. He's been absolutely terrific since we spoke last time. Pretty much every metric has been favorable for him. In the past 30 days that he's been pitching. There's a lot of consistency with him. It used to be more common for him to just kind of fall behind in counts and then have to claw his way back against hitters. I think that's been a major piece of sort of this rally that he's had. He's been very reliable overall, and in addition to having an increase in the strikeout rate, a decrease in the walk rate, the sharp contact has been coming way less often as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it's been a classic case of just trust yourself to throw strikes early in counts, force batters to prove that they can hit your pitches when you throw them in the zone, and it's been working for him.
Yeah, a guy who's consistently averaging 5+ innings. Sort of been through it a year ago. Pitched about a solid half season there. So yeah, he might even cut in front of Corella as the next guy. Maybe it'll be a righty lefty combo for the 8 and 9 starters with Birmingham. Or they just bring all of Birmingham to Chicago. Frankly, that probably should speak to the roster. Bring the entire roster up to Chicago, and then you got to fill it in. So that would be good news for Tyler Schweitzer. Yeah, a guy I didn't want to skip again because he does seem to have got his feet under him and is getting that groove that would point him. I mean, his timeline would have been Birmingham, really, I don't want to say regardless of results, but even the results weren't as impressive. But the fact that he's holding his own pretty consistently, but probably taking at least a small step forward and sort of really starting to heat up heading into June does seem like bus ticket west of Birmingham is on the docket for him. All right, let's skip to a guy who, conversely, has given us reason for a little bit of pause. Pretty hyped guy in Peyton Pallette coming into the season. Been considered among the handful, even with all the trades over the last 9 months or whatever, bringing in all this non-homegrown talent to the system. And as he sort of falls down the system rankings because they're just importing ringers from other organizations because we can't seem to find them on our own. Pallette's a guy who this year has. I mean, tell me, is this an illusion of struggle, or is he really sort of hit a wall with what he's done this year? Because it does seem like, among all the really good storylines, there's been a few that haven't been, and Pallette might be really close to the top of guys. You got to say, a couple months in, it's been a disappointment.
Yeah, he's been disappointing, although I think it is at least a little bit of an illusion, the slow start that he's been off to.
Mm-hmm.
The sharp contact is coming too often against him. However, even still, 23% of fly balls he's allowed are leaving the stadium. That's not going to be sustainable for opposing hitters. So, that's been unlucky. The 377 BABIP against him, that's also, not going to be sustainable. Yeah, there's a lot I think that he has to work through. He is issuing too many walks, and giving up sharp contact has been a problem. Although I think that it is, I don't think that he's pitching nearly as badly as his ERA would indicate at the moment. And he's just recently turned 23. I don't think, I'm not completely out on Pallette.
Oh, yeah.
Despite how this season has gone. I think it's still possible he ends up in this intimidating Birmingham rotation by the end of the year, but he's going to have to make some adjustments, and I think he can make them. It's just a matter of will he make them?
Yeah, that XFIP is really, it's not quite half, but the ERA is a little gaudier than it should be. And, really even last year, he didn't, he just didn't burn things up. He's coming off of, surgery. So, he is probably at this point still maybe easing his way in. He's barely got maybe what we would consider a full season of games as a pro under his belt. So, we're certainly not jumping, Peyton. Sorry, we're not at your throat here at all. It's just, there are flags that are concerned, and we're seeing stars when we're doing the updates saying, geez, it's another 5 earned runs, or another outing that didn't quite get to 5 innings, and it's just concern for a second round guy who we've been hyped about. Even again as his ranking has sort of fallen as the Drew Thorpes come into the system and just push the guys who are already there down, sort of steal some of their glory without having necessarily earned it in the Chicago system. That doesn't mean that he's not still considered a guy that's a real shining light for the system. It'll be interesting to see how he regroups. 7 starts in. So, there's a lot of season left to turn this into certainly a better one than 2023, which wasn't all that spectacular. And, point to Birmingham, maybe get his feet wet in Birmingham as a guy who starts every 2 weeks, because they're just never going to let anybody leave Birmingham. It must be a really great place. I got to get to Regents Field. It must have a really good pregame spread or something. All right, Joe, apologies to Juan Corella and Riley Goins. We've talked about you before. You know that we love you. So, you just keep moving again, you want to be part of that every 2 weeks rotation in Birmingham. You're on your way. You're going to be there. So we'll probably catch up with those guys next podcast, Joe, June. Let's take a break, and we'll move over to hitting, which actually is not necessarily a brighter and happier move, really. But, we got to talk about the hitters, too. It's not fair. Can't just ignore them. I guess I don't think there'll be a situation where we'll just get to ignore pitching or hitting. It hasn't come up yet. We'll talk Winston-Salem Dash hitters after the break. Stick with us. Joe does not have to don his suit or tuxedo quite yet, so hold with us for a minute or two. We promise we'll be back to talk offense in Winston-Salem. Hey there, White Sox fans, Chicago minor league system fans, Joe Resis fans, Winston-Salem Dash fans, specifically all of you out there. We are addressing you and you only on this edition. It's number 55 of Sox Pop on the Farm with the Winston-Salem Dash and Joe Resis, a little bit further east than we're used to having him. Hey, we're only a time zone away from each other for a change, Joe. This is nice. Wow, it's like we woke up at the same time.
Yes, we were, for a few years there, we were in the same time zone.
Yes,
but it's good to be almost back.
That's true. Yes, and thanks for holding down. It's getting, I don't know if it's getting a little crowded. We get people coming through all the time, but, thanks for holding down and providing some real stability to the, I guess we have to call it the California field office. You got a long commute there. I really appreciate you getting on the road for that long commute to Southern California, because that is, that adds up. You have to be sure. Submit your mileage. I'm sure Vox will take care of that for you. So, make sure to track that mileage. All right, we're going to talk some hitters. And as we started last time around, Joe, we'll talk about a dearly departed. Not dead, of course, but steaming his way to the south side. I'll admit, You can look it up live. You want to look at our YouTube Whatchamajigger playlist, you can look it up live, and you can see the disappointment on the face of myself and Tommy Barbie and Malachi Hayes when the pick of Jacob Gonzalez was announced, because it's another shortstop that seemed to be fairly unremarkable, though bat disciplined shortstop. And I got to say, not that you can be too down on a pick just made. I mean, how weird a pick are you going to make that you're going to be angry about it from the jump? Even Andrew Vaughn I could accept for a while. But listen, I'll admit, I want to get in the line early to admit I'm an idiot, because this guy has, after what was, I won't say mediocre, and he's just getting his feet wet as a pro. But last year wouldn't have told you there was going to necessarily be anything special, at least in context of a first rounder, Joe. But Jacob Gonzalez has, blown up. He's really setting the system on fire, and in a pretty loaded system. Even Brian Ramos made it to the Sox without necessarily having more than like a week, 10 days of really hot hitting. Jacob Gonzalez has just killed it. He's a guy who now seems like he might be pushing Colson Montgomery to the south side. Brooks Baldwin and Jacob Gonzalez are sort of like, okay, hey, we're in the shortstop picture too. And they're, arguably outperforming the guy, at the highest level. But Jacob Gonzalez has been everything you, I think, would hope that he would have been. And this just his first full pro season. You really cannot praise this guy enough. Of course, this is the last time we'll really get a chance to talk about him. So let's talk about him, Joe. What are you seeing in Jacob Gonzalez? The promotion certainly earned, but where's he heading from here? Because he seems like he doesn't want to stop at Birmingham either.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to watch him lately. It was, let's see, last time we spoke, he was kind of getting on base a lot, but wasn't really, besides that, wasn't a super, flashy, wasn't putting up the supersized numbers at the plate. Since then, though, things have changed, and, he's still got the sky-high on-base percentage, but now he's added, the extra base hit on the factor into his profile as well. For someone at his position, that is something that is very difficult to find. It was, I felt very happy to give him the Dash Player of the Week awards. It's great to see, a first round pick, show, the early returns are very positive on him early on here. And I think he can keep this up. He's in Birmingham, it's still a very pitcher-friendly park at Regions Field, and it's a small sample size so far. He's still crushing it in that small sample size in Birmingham. And I think, obviously that's not sustainable, but I do think that, it may have been a situation where, he very briefly hit a wall with Winston-Salem, but, a big part of development is, most players sooner or later will hit a wall, and, it's a matter of, can the player, overcome that and, become a better player at the other side of the wall. And I think we may have seen, him show that resilience and get past that, first wall that he sort of hits, at the professional level. I'm very excited to watch him from here on out. It was a pleasure seeing him, get some wins for the Dash in the month of May, though.
Yeah. Joe, present company excluded, but we're a dumb people, and we need to do things like comps to make us feel better and make us feel knowledgeable. So, of course, when Colson Montgomery is drafted, it's like, okay, yeah, he's going to be, Corey Seager because, I don't know, his height's similar or his build is similar. But, won't it be hilarious if the guy who turns out to be Corey Seager is a guy who didn't benefit from any comps? We already had a shortstop. I'm not sure why we drafted another shortstop. We already had our shortstop of the future, and of course Brooks Baldwin now is like, oh, okay, time out. You're forgetting about me. I'm better than both of these clowns. I mean, and none of this is to diss Colson Montgomery. He's at the toughest level now. This is his last step. I mean, there's no more development. He's going to be on the south side next, or nothing. So. It's certainly not to diss him at all to say, oh, hey, he's had more swing and miss or whatever. But I mean, the thing that's got to encourage you in terms of like professional hitting and understanding that until other than maybe a week of games here, Gonzalez has not been past a ball. But I mean, that 10% strikeout rate, I think, was exactly what the White Sox were aiming for in almost all of their draft picks last year. It's the closest thing we can point to we always like to look for the trends, right, in drafts and what's changing. There's a new guy drafting now, so what is he emphasizing? It clearly seemed to be contact, being on base, which again, Moneyball's like 50 years old now, so I mean, you'd think maybe some of this would have occurred to the White Sox before 2023, but I mean, Gonzalez is what was advertised. He's holding that up, and as you pointed out, he's adding now the power stroke, some of the exit velocity that you want to see in a guy who can be more than just a guy who can play, a Yolmer Sanchez or whatever in the majors, and a guy who might actually be able to make a mark. We're not going to throw Corey Seager around his neck here, but I mean a guy who could actually maybe be a standout player. And you just like to see. We've been so hungry for these types of prospects, much less major leaguers, who just come and crush it. We didn't even get that with Luis Robert. He's had those moments where he's the best player on the planet, but then he's off the field half the time. To see a Drew Thorpe hit the ground in the system, it just be unerring in his pitching. To see Jacob Gonzalez move the way he has, when a lot of us, let's be honest, I can't speak for you, but I certainly was like, well, who cares? But okay, it's another shortstop. Better to have another shortstop than another first baseman. Wonderful. But to be burning it up and to force himself right in front of my eyes to be like, hey, I am the guy. That's all we've been hungering for in this system. Whether we got to import that talent or whether we draft it, it's such relief to see a few players, if not a good number of players in this system. Some of them have even come from the Dash. Be those guys to say, hey, I'm going to be in the major leagues, and once I hit it, I might not look back. It's got to be a relief for you too as well, because we've been through so many failed prospects where we're just trying to hype them so much, and then they get to AAA or don't even make it there, and it's just like, oh, okay, well, who's next? It's a little more encouraging, bigger picture looking at the system, right?
Yes, absolutely. Other teams occasionally have this happen, or at least that's what.
Seems like all the other ones do, Joe.
Yes, I think the White Sox they're kind of overdue to. Oh, excuse me. The White Sox are kind of overdue to have some of these players pan out, and without any major bumps in the road,
mm-hmm.
Early on in their careers, and it's I haven't really thought of any comparisons for Jacob Gonzalez, but I wouldn't put the Corey Seager out of the question. I do think that would be of course, I'm not, banking on that by any stretch of the imagination. But I mean, the way he's been playing lately, I mean, you never know. It's been, I think that the farm system is in a spot where this could be a situation like Hawk Harrelson used to talk about the contagion in baseball, where
mm-hmm.
if when one person on the team, goes on a hot streak, a lot of the time it sort of, permeates to other members of the team. I think the White Sox farm system has at least a little bit of that going on at the moment, especially in Birmingham. So I mean, I think for some of these guys, there's a lot of potential there that could be reached.
Yeah, we don't want to make this podcast into any kind of Hawk Harrelson endorsement, and I promise we'll get back to talking about the Dash in a second. But there is something to be said for just winning. I mean, it's preposterous, Joe. We have not covered a minor league, a White Sox minor league playoff team. None of the teams that are still in the White Sox organization are that team. The Great Falls Voyagers was the last playoff team we covered here in this system. And okay, so what? Wins and losses don't matter. The only wins and losses that matter are in the major leagues. And if you don't make the playoffs, those hardly even matter, right? But I mean, contagion or not, just the fact that these teams are winning, they're competitive. Wins or losses are determined by whether you're better than the talent on the other team. When you're consistently like 30 games worse than 500 season after season, that tells you your talent is not measuring up, not just against, I don't know, the Tampa Rays, but against, I don't know, the St. Louis Cardinals or the Minnesota Twins. This is just heartening to see. And if it turns out that we've got our three shortstops, Colson and Brooks and Jacob. Okay, so they're all in the majors in September. Wonderful. We'll figure out a way to make them all work. They'll play somewhere. Force your way into the major leagues, guys. Let's do it. And Jacob, sort of this guy who started the race behind everyone else. And man, he's nose to nose with Brooks Baldwin and even Colson Montgomery at this point. So keep sprinting, Jacob. All right, nothing to contrast the prior drafts to the most recent one than to bring up guys like Shawn Goosenberg and Wes Kath, who even as they are hitting well, Goosenberg, I think, with the WRC Plus best on the team. Kath also very good in a space he's never been as a pro, still a young player. But these guys both are still striking out, roughly a third of the time, and that is going to be, even though they're hitting like beyond that, they're hitting well enough that that's not becoming the factor it should be. That's going to come up as soon as, I don't know, Birmingham. Pitchers are going to exploit that. So is this a process where now we've seen enough of a guy like Shawn Goosenberg or Wes Kath that's like, okay, this is what they are, and so it's going to be more fluky that they really succeed at a higher level? Or is there still time for either one of these guys to continue to adjust, as evidenced by the fact that they are hitting well, aside from the fact that there's a lot of swing and a miss in the game? Are these guys at this level still young enough that we can see progress where these guys could end up being viable AAA, even crack the majors and make a mark?
I think they still have the chance to be impactful at the major league level. They are young enough to where I think there is still time for that. And they've both taken steps forward this year. I would absolutely agree, though, that they do have to trim the strikeout rates. That's too many of their at bats are being are ending without any chance of reaching base safely. When you strike out, there's no chance of it happening. And for them being at high A, it is a little bit alarming to see both of their strikeout rates being that high, despite some pretty strong numbers elsewhere in their stat lines. Can they make adjustments to sort of reduce that and increase their batting averages and on base percentages? I think so. It's just one thing that might take some time, and it's a lot of times it's difficult to make those changes mid-season. They both made, like you said, a major step forward, but I think they might need to make another one for me to be convinced that they can succeed at higher levels.
Yeah. You sort of answer your own question. I'm so clever, Joe. You answer your own question by saying, guys who are getting too old to be at that level, they're not playing at high. So, I mean, I guess the implication, if you're still being rostered and getting out there in the starting lineup every day, of course there's ceiling for you, or else you wouldn't be playing. I mean, the problem, Wes Kath is like, okay, he's leading the Dash in home runs. He's shown he's always had the power stroke, I suppose. He's showing better contact, which must have meant his strikeout rate was like 45% for it, because I mean, he's still like, wow, holy cow, 36% strikeouts that's god awful. There's no way around that, no matter how young you are. And then you look to a teammate, a guy we talked about a lot on our first podcast together, DJ Gladney, who at the time was struggling and broke out a little bit. being a guy with a lot of swing and miss in his game too. I mean, if you cannot stitch that up to a degree, I mean, there's no amount of homers you can hit with those other 2/3 at bats, really, in almost every case, to justify being kept around too long when you're not even putting the ball in play a third of the time. So hopefully that is something that can be attended to, whether that's pitch recognition. I don't know, hole in the swing. That's for smarter people than me to figure out. But interesting that our two of our guys beyond Gonzalez, who's gone from Winston-Salem now. As much as we can hype Goosenberg with the speed in his game as well, he's always flashed. Still, I mean, some significant asterisks because it's like, geez, you dare go to Birmingham, and that's probably going to get badly exploited. And again, DJ, a guy who's might be younger than those two, certainly in that same age range, and I think having at least another year in the system under his belt, that he is scuffling and struggling a bit at Winston-Salem just to try to overcome that as well, because you just cannot be moved into Double-A, which is sniffing close to the South Side, while still just being, I won't say uncompetitive, but I mean ultimately uncompetitive in that percentage of your at bats. All right, a couple guys who actually have been bad. We're not calling anybody bad here, but whose performance has not played out even to the degree that Goosenberg and Kath have, would be Samuel Zavala, who, of course, Joe, we're talking, so we're going to talk about Zavala here. I don't know what Sevy's doing, so let's talk about Samuel and Loidel Chapelli. Zavala jumps out to me as a guy, and I'm going to guess you're inclined to agree here. It seems to be more a victim of bad luck than a lot of these other guys who have been maybe scuffling a bit. Plus, very young. I mean, 19, no matter how you slice and dice it, is pretty young, even for high A. So there's a lot being thrown at him. He's trying to weather it. But again, as the Zavala whisperer, are you seeing anything that's happened maybe in these a few weeks since we last talked that are indicating that that some real flex and a nice breakout and an overall season that's going to look good is in the offing for Samuel?
Yeah, I really think with his speed and how sharply he hits the ball that the 231 BABIP is lower than it should be. That strikes me as being just too low of a figure. Granted, I will say that he's very athletic. We've seen him drive the ball. He just needs to do it more often. Even with a BABIP that I believe would be completely average luck. I still think his numbers would be a little bit disappointing, given he entered the season as the number 6 prospect in the organization. That's that should have been something that I think after he just tore up low A pitching last year. I would have expected at least a slash line at the plate in high A that was at least a little bit above average still, and he still probably wouldn't have that with completely average luck. With him, it's his first couple of months of the season. He's been just as athletic as I would have expected him to be, and I really think that he's a major breakout candidate still. I think I would personally recommend buying his stock if that was a thing you could do. It's just a matter of he's got to somehow be more consistent with the sharp contact. That's pretty much the main thing right now. Is not we've seen him square up the ball, and he absolutely crushes it when he does that. He just needs to work on the hit tool. It's a very important tool, and I think he just needs to do it a little bit more often.
Yeah, the on base still being better than 300 despite having an average below 200 is notable to me. The fact that he's the WRC plus is still just 90, and with a guy who's not even hitting 200 tells you this guy is packing enormous value. And the K rate seems, you'd like it to be even lower, but it certainly seems like, the outs are coming because unlike maybe the Castle of the world, he's putting ball in play, and you're right, you combine that with his speed or his power, and I would have to think that the numbers are gonna respond, and you can be you can wear the Zavala fan clubs t-shirts more openly and out in public, very soon. I imagine that's just around the corner in June for you. So, make sure they're all laundered and pressed. Joe, let's wind up with Loidel Chapelli, because he was a guy a year ago who was like the surprise assignment to high A, first stateside play at all. He went from the DSL, older DSL player, but went from the DSL to high A. Burned it up, I want to say, for about a month. He looked like a guy who maybe we might have been talking about, like the way we're talking about Jacob Gonzalez now, my new prospect crush. I mean, certainly it was Loidel a year ago. He sort of plateaued, flattened out, and really hasn't gotten much going this year either. And he's small in stature. He's sort of a power packed energy wad, but he's a smaller player. I'm not sure. I mean, he's had a full season under him. Not really getting out of the gate well in a season that you would reasonably expect to see Birmingham at some point, despite the fact that nobody's ever going to matriculate from Birmingham aside from like Rian Ramos, punched the right buttons and he got to the south side right away. Nobody else is moving, but I mean, Loidel seems to be a guy who would have been ticketed, if not to start the season, the way he got off last year, soon, certainly post-draft to Birmingham, and it just doesn't seem like that's going to happen. And as a guy now who would be more of just like a mediocre prospect at high A, I mean, maybe we shouldn't be devoting time to him, but he's a guy who seemed to start last year with such promise, has a lot of the tools you would expect to see a guy who could at least move through and succeed at least at the upper levels of the system, if not on the south side. What's your take on what's happening with Loidel, and is he a guy that we should still be, considering or regarding maybe as highly as we once did, because he did sort of like come out of nowhere. He's age appropriate, but it's not really clicking for him.
Yeah, I think he's not going to be a big time power threat really at any point. But I do think that kind of the value that he showed last year I think it's something that he can get back to. I mean, despite the lack of power, he really got on base very often, and he's still a threat on the base paths. We've seen that with him both last year and this year. I think, it's one of those things where once again we're seeing sort of the hit tool, taking a bit of a hit. No pun intended on that one, but when for an outfielder and second baseman who is Zavala, I've still got my mind on him. Like someone who is like at a non super premium position. It's completely understandable, to not have a ton of power, but when that is the case, you really do have to be solid with both the hit tool and the speed tool. We've seen him run the bases very well, but I think as far as can he return to his 2023 form? I think he can. There's not really a good reason for someone in their age 22 season to see their walk rate drop that much, and to see their strikeout rate rise. Those two things going hand in hand have sort of derailed Chapelli's season, but he's very. I still think that he can get back to that level that we've seen him in the past, and he's still a decent prospect. It's just part of it is the BABIP luck is in a different league compared to where it was last year. I think so. We'll see some of that naturally evening out through time, but I think he'll bounce back. Question is when.
Yeah. The BABIP luck might be a little bit tough at 258 now, but then you look at last year at 330 and say, okay, well, is that very honest either? So, I mean, I don't know what the true level for him should be, but we can't just pin it all on that. And listen, Loidel, my brother, come on, let's step it up. We need to see you in Birmingham. It's been like 8 months of play at High A, 7 months of play in High A. Let's move up to Birmingham. We want to talk about you as a Baron. Imagine those two literal like fire plugs, Alexander Womack and Loidel Chapelli somehow playing together in infield. Man, we would think we were watching a Little League game until they hit a ball from 350 feet. Okay, Joe, I think that wraps who we need to talk about. Joe Resis, again, smart guy, quick to compliment him all the time. He's eating his meal the right way here on his trip back to the Chicagoland area. He's not eating dessert first. He got the White Sox game out of the way, no matter how many campfire milkshakes he had. He got the meal out of the way. Now dessert's coming. Get a little bit of celebration here on the weekend. Rumor has it a wedding he'll be participating in. I've got my feelers out. If we can get Joe Resis dance footage, I trust we will upload it to the Sox Populi YouTube page. So, keep an eye on that. Maybe set an alert for that. Search terms Joe Resis dancing, something like that. I'll tag it that way. If we can get it, that we, as a service to our readers and viewers and listeners, will provide it. So, Joe, just keep in mind, stay light on the feet. Moderate with the champagne, and have a good time tonight. Thanks for taking a little time out on a busy road trip. Glad there's no Sox necessarily in your future. You got your loss under your belt, so it's like, you can sort of cross the Sox off of your list this year. And I guess sometime, I don't know, probably closer to mid-June-ish, I guess, if it's every 4 weeks, we'll be talking again about the Dash. Maybe by this time they'll be north of 500 and in playoff contention, and we'll be hyped because there'll be a new guy to talk about. There'll be a new Jacob Gonzalez to get hyped about, and we'll be excited again, and we won't even have the excuse of like a wedding to go to be excited about our talk together. Thanks for taking the time, Joe. I appreciate you fitting this in.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks, everybody, all of you super fans of the Winston-Salem Dash, White Sox minor league system, Chicago White Sox, Sox Populi, Southside Sox. Brett Ballantini, the host. What's he doing here? We can never figure it out. If you're trying to do the Where's Waldo, why is he here? Well, you're going to have another edition to do that again, because I don't necessarily know why I am. We know why Joe Resis is here. He's our Winston-Salem Dash expert for the season, our stalwart on the weekly, monthly, all-star Player of the Week, Player of the Month stuff for us, the Southside Sox, and our update writer every Wednesday night. Does not ever have to cover the rookie leagues, man. He figures it out. He doesn't have to pay any attention to Arizona, but everybody else. So look for Joe Resis' byline on Southside Sox. And in about a month or so, we'll be talking again about the Winston-Salem Dash as they push toward the playoffs. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everybody, for listening and reading out there. And we'll catch you again in a week on Sox Pop on the Farm, and in a month or so with more Dash information.